In this video, I want to cover just one part of a really big question that I get a lot when you write a book called No Self, No Problem. One of the more popular questions is, well, exactly what is it about having an ego that isn't very friendly and it's a problem? And why isn't your ego your amigo kind of thing? And so I want to cover that just from I'm going to try to make this a short video, so I'm going to cover it maybe in a couple videos over the next few weeks or so, because you have to hit it from a bunch of different angles to really get into it, because it's a fairly complex situation, and it's something that we just don't think about. On the surface of it, just to start us off, having an ego is having something. And yeah, at least it's the idea of having something. And that's the problem with things. When we have them, they may create a bit of joy and we have some positive emotions. You just get a new car. But then comes all the worry. You have to protect it. You have to maintain it, manage it. And then you start wondering, what's to become of it? And is everyone else going to always be in agreement that it's mine? Because people do steal things. And the second you have something is the moment you start to worry about it. And there are all kinds of stories and movies and myths about individuals who are really happy, living a very peaceful, simple life. And then they run into money or power or fame or something. Then they run into something, and all of a sudden their happiness is gone because they become so concerned about this thing. They don't have that simple peace of mind that they had previously. There's a very strange thing about ownership that we almost never talk about. And I've discussed it maybe one or two videos, but ownership is one of these strange social agreements that just can go unnoticed in a lifetime. We don't want to talk about it because that's exactly what it is. Ownership is absolutely an illusion, almost exactly like the self, because it rests entirely upon thinking minds in agreement, almost like contracts that these things exist. So there's no reason why I have a car. There's no reason why someone can walk into New York City and just walk into a building and people all agree. They say, oh, that's your building. And we fell into this early when people said, if you work really hard, you'll get a lot of stuff. And they never mentioned to us once that the idea of having anything or any stuff rests on an amazing assumption that we just hope holds up. And that is the assumption that everyone else is going to agree that this is my stuff. And in terms of our species, this is a very new ownership is a very new thing on the planet, literally. So if you take the vast amount of human history and even the time that Homo sapiens have been on the planet, the idea of ownership is really new. And so, and again, you could see this in other species. They have territories, but this is all, it's not a social agreement. If some other animal tests this, the animals fight it out. But with humans, it's different. Sometimes we fight it out, but a lot of times these social agreements are entirely abstract constructs that are based on culture, and we're taught them so early we don't question them as we get older. And maybe some suggestions that maybe a necklace was really the first thing that we owned. And once that ownership happens, then we started to trade. And that's a really new, strange thing to do, to trade. Because it rests on the idea that you are capable of owning this in the first place, and that there even is a you. So the idea of ownership, think about it. The idea of ownership entirely depends on there being a self to own it in the first place. So the two had to emerge almost simultaneously and maybe completely depend on each other. And this is true with kids too. And so kids come into the world, and they don't have a sense of self, and as soon as language and the self-concept, the ego kicks in at 2 or 3, and then the kid will start demand, this is mine, and don't touch that, that's mine. And they've made that great divide. And okay, so ownership and the self might be tied together, and it's a house of cards, and it's resting so delicately on this idea that you will buy into it. And so, what is it about this ego that is so problematic? Well, it's exactly that. It's so problematic because it rests on everyone else buying into it, and we don't. And so, think of things like slavery. Human beings have enslaved other human beings, and that's a um, completely invalidates. Like I have a self, but this other person doesn't, so that allows me to own them, and has caused great suffering because it's a breach of the contract. And but I think it comes down in an almost more simplistic way to the first point, that just to have something, to have an ego, is problematic because having anything is problematic. As soon as you have it, then there's you, and that you has to take care of it, that you has to manage it, that you worries what's to become of it, what's its future, and think about you know eh, dragging an ego around, worrying about where it's going to be. It seems to be one of our central sources of stress. And whether it's where am I going to college, where am I going to work? Um, that management of the self, of the ego, was a central mission starting in the 60s. When okay, you have a self, it's like, okay, I have a car, I better take care of it, and I better polish it, and keep it running well. And that was the basis of the self-improvement movement. As soon as you start recognizing and having this ownership of a self, then you become the CEO, and your job is to manage it. And the funny thing is, that doesn't even exist.